días a todos. Bienvenidos en esta ciudad incomparable como es Santiago de Compostela. Vamos a comenzar esta conferencia inaugural del Congreso, en la cual, pues bueno, como bien sabéis todos, nos va a acompañar una persona de gran relevancia, que es Martín Igmar. Martín es licenciado en Medicina y es doctor en Investigación Neurológica Experimental por la Universidad de Lund en Suecia. Desde el año 1988 es profesor del Instituto Karolinska. En principio empezó siendo profesor de neurofisiología y a partir de 2007 pues, de medicina integrativa, así como todo lo relacionado con todas las actividades de investigación en el Centro Osher de Medicina Integrativa. Ha sido también decano del Instituto Karolinska y hoy es actualmente el vicerrector de este instituto. Él ha ocupado pues, numerosos puestos directivos, no solo de representación, sino también en muchos organismos de investigación en salud pública, como ha sido presidente de la Junta del Consejo Sueco de Investigación para la Salud, de la Vida Laboral y Bienestar y presidente de la Junta Directiva de la Fundación Mundial para la Infancia. Martin Igmar, dentro del marco teórico que desarrolló la Universidad de Harvard con Michael Porter y Elizabeth Eisberg, tres organizaciones, como fue la propia Universidad de Harvard, el Instituto Karolinska y el Boston Consulting Group, pues fundaron un consorcio que lo que tenía era como único objetivo avanzar en la medición de resultados en las prestaciones sanitarias, algo que nos compete a todos y en el que todas las comunidades autónomas pues, estamos trabajando. Y el nombre, como bien conocéis todos, pues es el International Consortium for Health Outcomes Measurement, conocido para todos nosotros como ICHOM. La misión fundamental de cualquier sistema de salud, sin duda, pues es alcanzar buenos resultados en salud. Ya no es suficiente la valoración técnica de una intervención, de un tratamiento, ya no es suficiente la cuantificación de todo lo que hacemos en salud y en nuestros sistemas sanitarios todos los días, sino que creo que tenemos un gran reto, que es conocer el impacto que están teniendo nuestras intervenciones y nuestras acciones en nuestros pacientes. Y aún más allá, no solo el saber lo que hacemos con nuestros pacientes, sino poder demostrar y saber esos resultados en salud esperados con ellos, pues tenerlos cuantificados sin duda. Por lo tanto, esa medición en resultados en salud, esa asignatura pendiente que tenemos todos los gestores, pues es la herramienta más poderosa que tenemos los sistemas de salud y que tenemos que desarrollar. Sin embargo, esa medición continua, rigurosa, sistemática, sigue siendo escasa en la mayoría de los escenarios conocidos y sin duda pues en nuestro país y en las distintas comunidades autónomas. Por lo tanto, implantar un sistema de salud basado en el valor pues implica una gestión adecuada de este cambio que tenemos que hacer, así como crear esa comunidad multidisciplinar, multiservicio en torno a nuestros pacientes, ese esfuerzo de la empatía y sin duda ese trabajo en equipo. Por lo tanto, ese reto que tenemos de basar todas las decisiones clínicas en resultados, lo que nos va a hacer es mejorar esa calidad de la atención y no olvidarnos sin duda el reducir los costes y evitar esos errores y esos procedimientos innecesarios que en el día a día seguro que todos vosotros, directivos, gerentes, y lo vemos asiduamente. Por lo tanto, para hablarnos de todo esto, pues hoy está con nosotros Martín Igmar, fundador con Michael Porter de ICHOM y en estos momentos también vicerrector del Instituto Karolinska. Martín, cuando quieras.
Good morning, everyone. How many of you, is there anybody here, or raise your hand if you've ever been a patient in a hospital? See, you gave away your personal information and everybody could see it. But you did it in a voluntary way. And that's what we are dealing with today in healthcare. We are dealing with the problem of information. Information that's partly personal and information that is partly important for our life. And we haven't sorted the information. So it's all there in a pile. I have an idea since 15 years that healthcare, which is the most complex industry that mankind has ever constructed, must have data that is of good quality in order to function well. 2012, a paper was published in New England Journal of Medicine demonstrating that about 40% of what we do in healthcare we shouldn't do. About half of the decisions that were taken in the best hospitals actually had an evidence base. And 2 years later, a paper was published demonstrating that in the United States healthcare system, medical errors resulted in the death, the early death of 370,000 people a year in the US. So there is no question that what we do is important, but there is a great question in how should we organize our work. We must figure out a way to pack the 3 levels of interoperability together. We are all taught by the same teacher in order to do what we should do. The same thing for the same problem. We call that procedural interoperability or operational interoperability. We do the same thing. If somebody's bleeding, stop the bleeding. If somebody has a streptococcus, give them antibiotics, etc. So we have a number of sort of shared decisions, shared knowledge that leads to shared decision. But patients are very variable. My knowledge is variable, and my context is variable. So I end up with what we call a difficult decision space. The problem that we have today is that we have very little or bad tools to share our knowledge in real time. Which means that essentially I have to leave my chair, go out in the corridor and say, now I've done this with this patient, now you are going to do your thing with this same patient. That's how rational it is. It's about the same type of logic that was present already at the Stone Age and Bronze Age. So we're in trouble because patients expect more. And then we have put in lots and lots of computers in order to help this. But the problem with the computers is that they lack what is called interoperability. They don't speak to one another. I made a calculation with some of the doctors in our hospital, and I figured out that all of them had to relate in their decision making to 14 different computer systems. not the collected information around the patient, but they had to search for information on the patient in 14 different computer systems in order to get the work done. It's completely unacceptable. This is how we organize the data in healthcare. In a pile of data. And if you have a pile of data, can you see where the error is? No, it's difficult to see if something is missing. It's difficult to see if something that is there that is wrong. But if we organize our data, it's quite easy to understand, because then we give data a context. And in that context, it's possible to find an error very quickly. And it's possible also to really catch the essence of the data quite quickly, because it's organized according to how I think. Language happens to be a very good way of organizing data. But the problem we're dealing with is that our friends in the medical record department and the companies that sell these instruments to us, they have not understood this. So they serve us too much unsorted data that actually suffocates us in healthcare. And even worse, for you that run healthcare, manage health, I'm a healthcare manager, you have absolutely no instruments of quality to do the management with. So you have to look powerful and stern and look important in order to get things done, rather than having the data drive healthcare transformation. When we have poor data system, we end up working according to the profession logic, which is a pre-industrial way of doing it. So we have a doctor, we have a patient, and we make some decisions and we do things. If we instead decide, let's work the same way for similar problems, then we can find data points that we should pick up. And at that point, it's suddenly possible to pick out data and understand what's going on. That's what some quality registers do. That's what some dashboard technology is doing. But we are standing now right in front of the next information revolution in healthcare. And that is when we move away from electronic medical records that look backwards to planning tools that tell us what looks forward. Could you adjust the sound, please? It's a wow, wow, wow. We go to electronic planning tools that look forward. And that's a very, very, very big revolution that's coming. And it's all based on what you all learned some years ago. We must work in processes. Do you work in processes? Rarely. Because you don't have the information tools to support the knowledge sharing along the process pathway. And the reason is simple. The reason is that the electronic medical records, or the medical records if you don't have electronics, they never give you the group perspective. They only give you the patient individual perspective. So you have no data for the group. So the data for the group that I have as a doctor or a nurse is something I was taught in med school 30 years ago, that was taught to my teacher 30 years before that. That's the type of knowledge that you can create in this one. Instead of having up-to-date knowledge that the perspective of value-based healthcare gives you, namely, you characterize what you're doing in ordinary statistical terms. There's still an echo in the woo. So you take down the bass, please. And it's only meaningful if data is obtained in the same way for the same reason at the same time point in all subjects, i.e. captured under what we call a model, a clinical model for how we should catch the data. So, you guys, you plan healthcare from a population perspective. We do healthcare from an individual perspective, and we try to analyze it from a group perspective. But if the data flow is not simplified between the individual perspective and the group perspective, we're going to have the same healthcare in 20 years, only much more expensive than we have today. I'll give you some examples that we have worked with, just to illustrate what can happen when you do something in an information-supported process care, and not only process care. So we went to I worked with this since 2006, this primary care center for psychiatric ill health in the southern Stockholm area, a catch area of 80,000 people. When we arrived there, they had a manual administration and documentation, limited information sharing, and no support for process. So we started working with checklists and mandatory outcome data. Patient-delivered data. Every session, they told us what had happened. Professionally agreed processes and that decreased the variability in care. And all cognitive behavioral therapy in diagnosed specific processes, and treatment intensity was based on evidence. So we were able to get a mechanism whereby the needing patient got a lot of treatment and the easy patient got very little. And this resulted in that we drove down the variability. People did the same thing. The professionals and patients felt much more empowered, and we got very good results. And we even got an economically very effective process. So for the patient population, we found that 40% of primary care patients were primarily helped by this type of treatment. And the patient satisfaction was dramatically improved. And they were off diagnosis 12 months later in 85% of the cases, which is world-class. It's what you would expect from the literature in the best randomized controlled studies. But the more interesting thing is that we were able to have a stepped care. We could step the care from understanding that all they needed was a little bit of information and coming back 14 days later to check out that everything was okay. Or that they could get an internet cognitive behavioral therapy treatment, or that they could get a group CBT, or an individual CBT, or that they had a psychiatric ill health that was of the class that it should go to secondary care. So with this, we were able to embed this in the literature by our scientific studies. We got them off diagnosis in 85% of the cases. But as a manager, it was extremely nice to see that we got this with a cohort average of only 6 visits to the primary care clinic, in spite of these very intense treatment modalities. And that to us was really, really important. So we had online data of disease severity that guided us on how intense the treatment should be. And everybody could see everybody's data in the professional group so that they can compare notes, and we got the variability to decrease. Here's another example. It was mandatory from 2004 to measure the inflammatory indicators in blood in all rheumatoid arthritis patients in Sweden and report to the quality register. And just by measuring it, we were able to press it from around 10 down to around 3 to 4, the CRP. Which means that here we had 30 to 40% patients with ongoing cartilage destruction. And over here, no patient get crooked fingers. That's pretty good for a whole country, 10 million people. And we could also see that in certain areas they had a very wishy-washy treatment and missed very often. And then they made an educational effort in process care for these patients. And since then, they have almost every month been lower than the national average in that region. So that's what you can reach with real-time back propagation of data to the healthcare professions. The healthcare professions are there because they want to do good for their patients. If we provide instruments so they can get access to the data of the results of their professional activities, wonders will happen. You don't need to look important anymore. You can go out and be happy with the professionals. Another example, cardiac congestion in the Stockholm area. It's a joint project between the Stockholm County Council and Karolinska Institutet. And so it's a 2 million catch area. We decided, or they decided that ran the project, they decided that there were a number of things we need to do with each patient so that we know whether they can stay in primary care or should go to secondary care. So that we know that we have early warning signs to find the patients that don't do well, so that the patients themselves can use this wonderful thing to report symptoms to healthcare. And if they report a symptom, they get, please go to the laboratory and take a blood test. So they go to the laboratory and show the telephone, and then they get their blood sample taken. No contact with healthcare professionals yet, just a simple decision tool. If it looks bad, take a blood sample, and then they take a blood sample. And that, together with symptoms, allows them to act on it. What happened? Better diagnosis, a bit more patient went to second-level open care visits for workup. Readmissions coming back for in-care hospitalization for exacerbations decreased over time, and adherence to guidelines increased in the whole area. 60%, we're not happy yet. We're going to go up to 90. We have that for myocardial infarction, but this is world record, so I guess it's okay. But what happened from a managerial point of view is that we had happy patients, happy professionals, and for every dollar we spent on this new way of organizing healthcare, we got $8 back. 8 to 1. There are a few investment cases that come up to that status. So now we go for the next one, and this is done in Western Sweden, where we look at the whole population, 1.6 million population, for COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And we did the same thing. We went to the profession. We asked them, what is important and what can you influence in order to improve the health status of the patient. So they gave us all this, and interestingly enough, they gave us a lot of biology from healthcare, but they also gave us ideas on what should be supported, like self-management, psychological counseling for the anxiety-ridden patients that otherwise go to healthcare, exercise training, physical activity coaching, nutritional counseling, and optimization of drug treatment. Doing that program, dramatic results, very quick this time, because this is right now only the first data from the single clinic that did it. So we have a national quality register, and we have the Western region has quickly and dramatically improved, and the specialty clinic have improved even more, and they have the sickest patients, because that's where the knowledge was. Just demonstrating that the hospitalization for bad exacerbation in COPD was possible to decrease in the order of 35%. We got rid of 35% of hospitalizations. The investment case for this one is pyramidal. It's much more than 8 to 1. And we're now rolling this out in all of Europe, we hope, in one of these H2020 programs. And we have the famous Spanish pulmonologist Alvar Agusti in Barcelona as partner in this project. It's really cool. We're going to see whether we can transfer the knowledge from one area to the next hospital, to the next hospital, to the next hospital, to see how we can spread best practice, not by telling people to do the right thing, but spreading best practice by having an information load that is of quality and guides the decision-making in the clinic. So the important thing here is it's not somebody else that determines my process. It is determined locally between patient and profession. But we are extremely adamant about a strict semantic structure and a clinical model. For those of you who would like to understand more about what a clinical model is, Intermountain Healthcare in the United States, you can find that on the web, have a very good description of that exact reference. So we used an industry tool, the concept of service design. We're here to serve the patient. We're not here to ask them to go there or don't come here. We're here to serve in order to improve the health. And we also need to know what words that we use, and surprisingly, we got very fast results. So how do we drive change with data? We have to have data that resonates with the value set that each of the stakeholders have. Because if we don't have data, the value set is going to develop differently for the profession, for the patient, for the industry, and for the payers. Everybody say that we're here for health and we want to help people, patients, etc. But when you look into it, these guys want to sell more. These just want to have more care. They don't care about the same thing as these do, that only want technically complicated care in specialty settings. And these guys, they just want it cheap. And in order to change that, there is one form of information that's crucial to drive the value correctly. And that's the following. We remove the individual value sets and we give back online to all the stakeholders outcomes that matter to patients. So we know what the impact of healthcare is. That's exactly what we did in ICHON. International Consortium for Health Outcome Measurements. It's on the web. We designed measures that actually are the same in Hospital A, Outpatient Clinic B, and in Web Doctor C, and in Healthcare System E. So they can compare results. These outcome measures includes patient-reported outcome measures, but also clinical measures. Turned out that this has an enormous influence on care if you're able to catch the data properly and send the aggregated data back properly. So that's the important thing. No, everybody's tired of all these measurements, but if we have found very clearly, and that's an important lesson for anybody who is in hospital management, if you ask healthcare professionals to register a measurement, you must be polite enough to give them immediate feedback of what that measurement has led to. That's common courtesy. So, mind you, please remember to feed back the information to the people that deliver information. This is true for healthcare professionals, and it's also true for patients. In the cardiac congestion project that I talked about, we made it so that anytime I had given data into healthcare, I got a nice receipt telling me what healthcare had used the data for and what it meant. An extremely good way of getting patient compliance. We got compliance that we have never seen before. We got patients that wanted to take part in healthcare and healthcare research. We wanted patients that really wanted to see what they could do in order to improve their own health. It was not the doctor taking care of my health, it was me taking care of my health with the assistance of healthcare. Very important. So what happens when you make your arrows this way? Well, suddenly you drive quality. By information from the patient level, you can drive your quality registers or your local quality system, and you can drive it with international measures, and thereby you inform the governance layer, the professional layer, and the patient layer at the same time. That's when you see development and transformation in healthcare. And one more thing, we need this type of data environment. If you go out there, you're going to see the word big data. You're going to see artificial intelligence. And you're going to see precision medicine. I think I counted to at least 6 precision medicine. What is precision medicine? Precision medicine is so high quality data that I am able in a patient group to discern what patient need what treatment. So it's data driven, all of that. All of those modern concepts are data driven. Our information plan is second only to the Netherlands. They're much better at organizing than we are. But we had local terms, no structure. We built a strategy, and now, late in the fall, we are able to launch within healthcare a randomized controlled study without external information sources. That's how strict you can make these types of information support in healthcare. So how does the architecture look? The architecture is simple. It's modular, and it doesn't allow the big EMR systems to take over what you do in healthcare, because then you're stuck with the way you worked in the 1960s and 70s. So we use that only to store information. But we also have a local storage where we have what we call data for execution of healthcare. That data storage supplies automatically execution direction and also monitoring on the group level. So we can do a lot of things in healthcare, but the only thing we say is if you want to sell me a machine of some sort, sell me a procedure in healthcare, I tell you, you have to inform what words you want me to use in order to describe it. So I get a complete structure of the language where I can use nationally defined terms, regionally defined terms, and also terms that we decided that we wanted to have locally. Run those, make a plan out of them in an industry standard called HL7 Fire, and then we can execute that. So we can ask the system to take care of the logistics. I do my procedures, that's what I'm trained for, but I'm not trained to say, please, nurse, take care of this patient. That's not what I'm trained for, but I do that 70% of my time. I do documentation 30% of my time, and on overtime, I do the actual patient work. That's how bad it is right now. If you have that type of system, something should happen here. If you have that type of system, the same mass of information will actually allow you to see the background data, the other teamwork. You can have team conferences based on real-time data. You will have automatic documentation. You can set a common treatment plan for all professions and also a follow-up plan. With that type of data, it's possible to work with one tool and one tool alone in the clinic, following the patient trajectory, and the patient can, of course, have his or her idea of what's going to happen. That's when you increase the ability to communicate with the patient directly. The important thing here is not the app. It's not the technical stuff. The important thing is the workup of the common information source for all these functions based on a strict semantic rigor that we worked up when we did the system. So in essence, we're able to online prescribe from the different academic groups of the world what we should measure in terms of quality. And if we do that for all patients, we can then publish locally the data. And just without moving the individual data, we can bring out data with just sending an algorithm. And then we can do benchmarking between hospitals without moving the individual data. So this is our next project. This is what we're starting right now. That's really cool. So the next struggle for healthcare is bringing down variability. For those of you who think variability is of interest, read the Martini Clinic dossier. The Martini Clinic in Germany, where they do prostate cancer operations. And they now do almost a third of the prostate cancer operations in all of Germany based on their brilliant clinical results, based on the fact that they actually review each case to see what is best treatment. And we have to remember that healthcare, as we were taught, doesn't exist anymore. My university was built back in some 200 years ago, when people killed one another. They died from infection and from too little to eat. That was a different healthcare from the healthcare that I myself was raised in, where we had metabolic disorder, cardiovascular disease, and cancer, and you came to the hospital, you were treated, and then thrown out. And suddenly we realized there are more survivors from cancer than there are cancer victims right now. There are more chronic cardiovascular disease, and of course the American disease, that we call it, the metabolic disorder, is rampant. So instead we have a healthcare that is flooded. It's difficult to get access to healthcare. We have patients that have a lifestyle that lead to about half of the disease burden in healthcare. And we have a healthcare that is not organized to meet the chronic patients. So we need to rethink and have a patient-centered information that follows the patient, whether they are in one clinic, another clinic, one care level, primary care level, and whether they were here a year ago or 3 months ago. We need to make sure that we can follow the patient in healthcare. And when we know that all of these disorders have double the risk to appear due to overuse of these two that are based in lifestyle, we need to include lifestyle advice in healthcare every time we meet a patient, not only for them individually, but for healthcare as a system as a whole. So the old model, where we have health and disease and don't really care if the patient feel ill or feel well, we need to change that, put them in parallel, and treat both from healthcare. Treat both the biology and also the lifestyle, in order to have a healthcare that can survive and actually will do its trick. So how do we organize our information then? Well, we must organize it like an onion, in layers. But all layers should be centered around the patient. And whether the information is from the systems level, from the doctor's level, or on the e-health level, all of them have to be based on the same information, and all of them must supply quality documentation. But in order to have that organization, we must have this terminology rigor that I talked previously about. And we must have, since we have that, we are also able to analyze in real time and send back information. This is what people call AI. It's not AI, it's just qualified statistics. AI is just magic. Mind you, when anybody says we have AI in healthcare, tell them no. So what's the patient value that we get here? We get a lower variation in procedures. We are able to plan our healthcare, so we always are evidence-based. We can have continuity of care over time and specialty, and we can get transparent quality data. And if we include the patients, we're going to be so rewarded with compliance and improvement. So we thought the idea of patient-reported outcome measures in a standardized fashion in several dimensions and combined with care data would provide a general quality measure. And so we started ICHOM, and now we're covering about 55% of the disease burden, and there are more standard sets to come. It's free to use. Anybody can download them. And in the fall, they're also going to be machine readable. It's a technical work that we finally got funding for, which means that it's possible now to measure in Barcelona, Madrid and Santiago the same measures and see if the regional fractionation of Spain is good for the patient or if it's bad for the patient. The problem right now, we don't know if it's good or bad. So structured data allows for shared knowledge, process orientation for sharing of knowledge, world-class best practice. So all computer systems understand one another, and we get a far cheaper IT architecture, and we get the quality data that I talked about. If we demand industrial logic output from healthcare, we must provide healthcare with industrial type information tools. Not tools that were designed 35 years ago that ties the professional down in a strict manual way of working. Advanced process support, and we must invest in the language that we use, and we must empower primary care to share the knowledge. Because as a patient, I want my primary care to be exactly as well informed as the secondary care. We have found that the problem of pushing patients to primary care is the fact that they don't trust they get the correct quality. We found in the big projects that we've done where we looked at cooperation between primary care and secondary care, that patients' acceptance and even embracing of primary care is very, very easy to see once they know that they are informed in primary care. But if you sit in a two doctor's office or a single doctor's office in a desert, information desert like Sahara, it's very difficult to be a good patient doctor in the modern chronic care. So the primary care must be included in this loop. That is the only way where we can reach what is called patient-centered information. The patient doesn't care if it's primary or secondary care. They care about care. So they need the same information to follow them wherever they are. So I'm going to end here by just stating that all this is reachable in a modular system that you can construct yourselves, because this is not rocket science. The rocket science is to understand, don't make sure that your data is constructed with a language that allow you to follow the patient all the way through. And mind you, always be able to jump from the individual perspective to the group perspective with your data. That's when we get a learning healthcare system. And that is where we should go. We must go, I think. And from what I've seen so far out here, I think it's time for you as hospital management to really set the correct demands on industry. Because industry will come to you with a nice little cable and say, if you just allow me to put this cable in somewhere in your system, we can flood you with all the information that you don't need. And that's exactly what you don't need. You need coordinated streams of information to healthcare that is organized in a patient-centered manner in order to get the best out of healthcare. People that work in healthcare system that have these types of information system, they love it. And really, does all your doctor love their work with EMR today? Just a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Bueno, pues muchas gracias por esta conferencia. Pasamos, si queréis, un minutillo, poquito tiempo que tenemos que con respecto a alguna pregunta, a través de la web no hay ninguna. Yo simplemente una pregunta, Martín, es decir, todos los gestores queremos saber esos resultados, sabemos que la información es muy importante, nos hablas de esa semántica. Mi pregunta es, ¿qué pasa cuando un sistema se encuentra con que esos resultados no son los correctos y en ese feedback que tú planteas entre profesionales, industria y pacientes es difícil contarlo por las repercusiones mediáticas que puede tener? ¿Cómo hacemos esa intervención?
That's a very good question. So we actually have a... Oh. Something happened. Well, we actually did that trick. The Swedish Heart Register had reports from all Swedish hospitals, and there was quite a varying result. And what happened was that we said, okay, in 2 years we're going to publish all the quality results openly. And then the lower quartile of the hospitals started to improve far quicker than the top quartile of the hospitals. And when it was started to published a year later, none of the Swedish heart hospitals deviated from the European guidelines. We demonstrated that it was 20 times higher risk of mortality, 20 times higher mortality in the worst hospital compared to the best hospital for rectal surgery, which meant that we removed those types of operations from over half of Swedish hospitals, simply because if we didn't have volume, if we didn't have quality, if we didn't have trained surgeons, it was lethal to go to those hospitals. So I think data that is collected in a way that the profession accepts can be as harsh as you like, and you will see positive guiding along with it. Data is always data if it's collected in a proper way. But when hospital management collects waiting time in the acute ward, which is irrelevant to healthcare, of course it's met with aggression. But if you measure, for instance, that you have prioritized in the correct way, and some do and some don't, no question that the profession will embrace it.
Bueno, pues thank you very much, Martin, y aquí en Galicia te esperamos de nuevo. Muchas gracias.